You already felt that just when he started showing more affection, more attention, when things seemed to finally flow, he just disappeared. No fights, no explanation, as if the feeling itself had scared him. For many women, this is confusing, painful, and deeply frustrating. But what few people understand, and what no one has told you to this day, is that the disappearance of a passionate man may have less to do with you, and much more to do with the way he was emotionally trained to react to his own desire. According to Deborah Tannen, communication between men and women carries hidden emotional codes that operate in silence. When a woman shows affection, she approaches. When a man feels something too intense, he often retreats, not because you don't want to, but because it was taught early on that vulnerability is weakness. And when he feels something for you that goes beyond the barriers of rational control, your emotional system goes on alert, as if you love it was a threat, not a shelter. This escape does not happen because he has lost interest, but because he conflicted with something he does not know how to name, the intensity of what he feels. Deborah Tannen explains that men were socially conditioned to avoid conversations that involve deeper emotions, and love, for them, is not just a feeling, it's a break, a collapse in the armor that he spent his whole life trying to keep up, so it disappears. Because being in love, for some men, it's like being emotionally groundless, and they don't know how to deal with it without looking weak. Most women interpret this disappearance as rejection, but what is behind it can actually be an unconscious request of time. Time to rearrange feelings, to understand what is happening inside it. And here is the more delicate point. The real one is, the scarier it may seem to a man who has never learned to name what he feels. Love disarms it, and this disarming can manifest itself as distance, silence, or even an abrupt output. You may have wondered, did I go too intense? Did I do something wrong? But perhaps the correct question is, was he ready to feel something so true? Deborah Tannen reminds us that men and women process affection in different codes, and when his emotional code collapses, he uses the only strategy he knows to protect himself, the removal, not out of evil, but for pure emotional fear of not being up to the feeling itself. Today you will understand exactly what is behind this disappearance. It will clearly see the emotional mechanism that makes a man flee, when in fact he is more involved than he would ever admit aloud. Stay to the end, because what you will find out here can completely change the way you interpret the silence of a passionate man. And more than that, you can give you the emotional power that you have believed to have lost so long. The emotional fear behind the escape. When a man begins to fall in love, he is not just opening his heart. He is, without realizing it, activating an emotional alert system that has been programmed in it from an early age. Deborah Tannen points out that men were educated to value self, control, rationality, and independence. Demonstrating intense feelings is often interpreted by themselves as a loss of mastery. So when love appears, he doesn't understand how to deal with. He feels but does not know how to translate. And so it runs away. This escape may seem cowardly or cold, but in fact, it is a desperate attempt to maintain the internal balance. Many men do not have emotional vocabulary to deal with what they feel. Deborah Tannen shows that in conversations between men, the bond is built more by action than by verbalized emotion. This means that when he finds himself involved in a feeling that he cannot express clearly, he silences, walks away, tries to escape from what exposes him so deeply. And what confuses women most is that this remoteness often happens as everything seemed to be doing well. But that's exactly where his trigger lives. When he feels he is too vulnerable, he reacts with distancing as a form of self-protection. He believes that upon disappearing, he takes control. But what he doesn't realize is that by doing so, he's hurting someone who just wanted to really love him. This contradiction between what you feel and what you do is what makes so many emotionally exhausted women, because there is no apparent logic. He disappears when everything seemed finally working. But in Deborah Tannen's eyes, This is a clear reflection of a male communication pattern that has not learned to deal with complex feelings. Deep love requires delivery, and delivery requires emotional language, something many men have not yet developed. This channel was created with a purpose, helping women who feel confusing and injured by male attitudes who seem to have no explanation. Subscribe now, because here you will understand the male mind in a way that no one has ever shown you before, with emotional depth, psychological clarity, and truth. The difference in the way to connect men and women build connections of different ways. And this, according to Deborah Tannen, is the root of many mismatches. While most women feel closer when sharing feelings, men connect more through actions, gestures, and silent companionship. When a woman wants to talk about what she is feeling, a man can interpret it as a problem, and it drives him away, even when he is in love. This shock of connection codes is devastating when not understood. A woman wants to talk about the future of the relationship. She wants to hear, "I feel it too." But man, without the same emotional fluency, feels pressured. For him, love is there, but it's like a language he doesn't know how to pronounce. Then he shuts up, and the silence hurts. But not because he doesn't feel, and yes, because he feels, and doesn't know what to do with it. Deborah Tannen points out that many men associate emotional surrender with the loss of autonomy, and if he is still building his identity, his space, or his inner security, intense love may seem a risk to his freedom. This is not an excuse, but it is a lens to understand the behavior. When he disappears, it is because the feeling is too big to control with the emotional tools he has. The pain of those who are unanswered is legitimate, but understanding this dynamic can transform suffering into consciousness. When you see that his disappearance is not about being too much, but about him being emotionally unprepared for that, the weight of rejection begins to decrease, and you begin to do with more love, more value, and more clarity about what you deserve. Now tell me with sincerity, have you ever lived something like this? Does that sudden, meaningless disappearance that made you doubt itself? Comment down here. He disappeared when I believed in both of us. I want to know your story because it matters, and it can help other women feel less alone. The masculine silence trap. For Deborah Tannen, man's silence is not the absence of feeling. It is language. He learned from an early age that talking about emotions exposes him, weakens him, takes him from a place of strength. Therefore, when he feels something intense, he uses silence as a refuge. But for those who are on the other side, this silence echoes as abandonment. The woman, when trying to talk, open her heart, seek clarity. But man sees this as a confrontation. He feels that he is being pressured to respond with something he cannot name, and then it disappears. Escape is the emotional answer he has learned to use when he has no resources to support what he feels. It is a silence full of noise inside. This pattern of behavior doesn't mean that he did not love you. Often it means that he loved it, and that destabilized him. Love, for a woman, can be the arrival at home. For many men, unfortunately, it may seem like an emotional storm that they don't know how to survive. They were not taught to remain in love. They were taught to resist the pain of exposure. So when he goes without warning, he is not trying to hurt you. He is trying to save himself from something he cannot manage. This does not exempt it from responsibility, but it allows you to realize that you were not the error. The mistake was what he couldn't feel, and especially in what he never learned to communicate. And that is why self-knowledge is liberating. When you understand the root of this behavior, you stop blaming yourself. You stop running after answers to those who only carry confusion. You break free from the anguish of thinking it was little, when in fact, it was too much for someone emotionally unprepared. When fear speaks louder than feeling, imagine what it is to feel so strong that it makes you doubt your own ability to deal with it. Deborah Tannen explains that many men do not flee for coldness, but because the feeling unbalances them of a comfortable emotional place. When passion becomes love, the kind of love that asks for delivery, presence, constancy, that's where fear settles in. This fear has deep roots, It may be fear of failing, fear of not being enough, fear of losing freedom, fear of repeating patterns he lived in childhood, such as betrayal, abandonment, or humiliation. All of this comes up when he finds someone who really plays him. And, as contradictory as it may seem, the more involved it is, the greater the desire to disappear. It is at this moment that the woman gets lost in a maze and doubts, because everything indicated that he was in love, the gestures, the words, the connection, but suddenly he goes, speechless, without explanations, and all that remains is silence. Deborah Tannen draws attention to the fact that man, by fleeing, avoids not only the other but himself. True love forces him to face internal parts that he would rather ignore. You have not been abandoned for being too much. You were left because he could not hold his own heart. Its value remains intact. And most importantly, this episode may be the beginning of a new phase where you begin to demand more, not aggressively, but consciously. You deserve reciprocity, no emotional puzzles. If this is making sense to you, comments below. Now I understand. He has ran away because he felt. Your comment may be the light at the end of the tunnel to another woman who has also been left in silence and is still trying to understand why. The invisible impact of this on female self-esteem. When a man disappears without explanation, what is left behind is more than absence. It is an emotional wound. Deborah Tannen states that when communication fails, what is left is a territory of interpretation. And unfortunately, women tend to fill this emptiness with self-criticism. Is it too intense? Am I always making mistakes? And that, day after day, it's self-confidence. This kind of silent abandonment is a slow poison for self-esteem. It installs questions, insecurities, comparison patterns. The woman begins to shape to be less next time, less emotional, less true, less deliberate. Without realizing it, she begins to lose her own essence, trying to avoid abandonment that she actually had to do with who she was. But Deborah Tannen warns us, it's not yours. A man's emotional disappearance is a reflection of the way he has learned to deal with his own vulnerability. When he can't face what he feels, he runs away. When you try to understand why and get no answer, you suffer. But it no longer needs to be so. From now on, you can see his silence as what it is, a reflection of it, not your failure. Rewriting this story requires you to look at yourself with more compassion, that you stop blaming yourself for what was not under your control, and let it start today to demand no promises, but presence. No beautiful words, but constant attitudes. Because true love does not disappear. It remains, even when scarce. The new way of seeing the disappearance. We got to the most important point of all, transforming what was once pain into wisdom. Deborah Tannen teaches us that understanding the difference between male and female communication codes is the key to rescuing their power. When you understand that he disappeared not because you were too much, but because he could not deal with the depth of what he felt, something changes inside you. You stop despair of answers that will never come. You stop romanticizing silence as a sign of love, and it begins to demand emotional maturity. From now on, you will look at his disappearance and understand. It says more about him than about me, and that is liberating, because there is nothing more powerful than a woman who understands her own value. You deserve a love. You don't run away. A man who stays. Let you silence you with your own fear, but walk by your side, even when you are insecure. Real love does not disappear. It remains, grows, learns, adapts. And you are not here to run after those who do not know how to feel. You are here to attract who knows how to recognize everything you are. This is the new perspective you take with you from today, not as a burden, but as a strength, as clarity, as emotional liberation. You no longer need to shrink to keep someone around. Your love is too valuable to be wasted on those who escape from what you need most. And if this video touched your heart, if it brought clarity to some pain that was still bleeding in silence, then share, short, and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving content that honor your story and return you what your right is: peace, self-esteem, and love that remains. We reached the end of an intense journey, but different from every time he disappeared and left silence in response. Today, you have something he might never have achieved: conscience. Not just about him, but about herself. You have learned that true love is not afraid to feel. It does not hide after excuses. It does not disappear when the emotion gets big. What you add when you feel too much. It's not love. It's immaturity. It's fear. It's internal confusion. And that is no longer responsibility for loading. During this video, you have plunged into truths that many women avoid facing for years, because accepting that someone left you, even loving you, can be devastating. But accept that the problem was not you and his emotional limitation are liberating. Deborah Tannen has shown us that men and women communicate in different ways, but that is not why you should accept emotional crumbs. You do not need to translate his silence. You need to value your clarity. And this clarity begins when you stop blaming yourself and start choosing yourself. Maybe he walked away because you were intense, because you looked in the eye, because you didn't pretend, because you felt and had the courage to show. And that, for someone who has spent a lifetime hidden behind strength masks, is unbearable. But you didn't come into the world to be bearable. You came to be felt, to be lived, to be whole. And who doesn't know what to do with an entire woman? To learn or move away. Because from today, you will no longer beg for answers. You will require presence. And when you understand that his disappearance was just a reflection of the size of his light and his emotional smallness at that moment, everything changes. You stop carrying a pain that was never yours. You stop seeking explanations in those who do not know how to explain yourself. And you start walking firmly with dignity, with the certainty that you need not be less to be loved. True love does not disappear. He builds himself. It remains. He faces fear and chooses to stay. You deserve this kind of love, and no less than that. And maybe now, with all this vibrating within you, it's time to make a real decision. Never to beg for those who treat you as an option. Never cling to what you don't know how to hold you back. To look back with compassion for who you went, and look forward with power for those who are becoming. You are here to live a love story, but that starts inside you. And let it never end in the void of someone who didn't have the courage to love you full. If you got here, congratulations. In truth, few have this courage. Courage to look in the mirror and say, I deserve more. The courage to face difficult truths. To listen to what no one has ever had the courage to say, and to stay firm until the end of content that moves everything inside. This shows that you are at a different level, a level of emotional maturity, conscience, and strength that few women reach. You are tired of emotional crumbs, tired of confusing relationships, unlawful disappearances of silences that hurt more than hard words. And it's taking a step that changes everything, the step of strengthening inside before seeking someone on the outside. So I want to make you a very special invitation. Leave a comment here below saying, I watched until the end. This simple gesture is powerful. First, because you will show me that you are really committed to your emotional transformation. And I really want to know who are the women who are walking with me on this journey. Second, because your comment can inspire other women to take this step too. You can't imagine how many women are exactly where you have been. And you will feel welcome to read that they are not alone. And since you have arrived here, check now if you are already subscribed to the channel. Sometimes we watch, like it, get emotional, but forget to click. And I assure you, the next videos will open your eyes even more and your heart. It will be like continuing an intimate, sincere, and deep conversation between the two of us, where you will find more answers, more strength, and more emotional freedom. If this video touched you in any way, leave your like. This helps the channel, of course, but more than that, helps other women receive this content. The platform understands that this video is important and passes it ahead. It is your way of contributing a chain of healing and awakening. And if you know a friend who is experiencing a similar situation, the one who is blaming themselves for a guy who disappeared, who is lost trying to understand his silence. Share with her now. It may be the hug she needs so much, but she hasn't found it yet. And lastly, but very important, most women only realize that they are attached to a destructive emotional cycle when they are already emotionally exhausted, when it has already lost self, esteem, confidence, and even the desire to love again. But you don't have to wait for it to get to that point. In the first comment fixed, I left the link to a complete playlist with content that will open your eyes, free you from harmful patterns, and show you that it is possible to live relationships that cure, not that they get sick. Watch now. We will meet in the next video.